There's no point trying to be secretive and just rolling.
Well, maybe you should be secretive with anxious people. Just saying. Don't let me know about it. Just surprise me.
Well, surprised because we're rolling.
Oh, for fuck's sake. And now you zoom on my face like boom.
Yeah. Right. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
You've
I am
basically
honored.
lived here for the last 2.5 years. So
Oh,
you're one
God.
of those
Actually,
guests.
I think I was here when you started the studio on the first day, when you put up all the tables and stuff.
Yeah, when it was an empty room. So now when it's like there's no room to move around.
I just saw you like growing in this beautiful,
and evolving.
very odd thing.
Odd thing.
Very odd thing. Every single time I come up here, is like something different going on.
Yeah, because
Which is great.
we're busy boys. We keep it...
Busy boys.
Doing
Now you see
stuff.
like Alex like laying down on the sofa. It's like busy boys on the phone.
When I say busy boys, I mean me and Matt. But yeah,
true.
Alex sometimes. But there's
You gotta
always something
mention
new. But yeah, so you're artist. You do photography, but you'll tell me off if I call you a photographer.
Well, yes. On a good day, I would accept it, but usually I wouldn't call myself a photographer. Just because I'm not like, as I told you before, I don't have like the knowledge required, in my perspective. I don't have the knowledge required to be a photographer. I just do photography. I just take pictures or self-portraits or pictures of everything I find interesting in the world, but I don't really have the knowledge to express everything within photography. I don't really know how to put that into words as much as I know how to work with art, like painting and drawing, let's say.
Because you're interesting, because you're... At the studio, we have creators of all sort of types coming through, but we normally, because we're a photo studio, deal with photographers who are photographers, photographers who maybe have an interest in fine art, but are like photographers, they're fine art photographers, but you studied art at university.
Yeah.
You started as an art in like the more traditional sense of paintings, and like when I met you, you were painting, doing some bits of photography, and now most of your output's photography.
Yeah,
so
which is
painting.
like, it's so strange because I haven't painted in like a while now. And I'm like, I keep going for photography more and more, which is so strange to me. I'm like, why is that? Why am I so...
It's quicker and easier.
Yeah. Actually, yes, it is. But at the same time, I do have like more space to express myself. Meanwhile, like painting, you have to buy canvases or sketchbooks. You have to buy paint. You're like, you're sort of like limited by money, let's say, or time, or the space.
Yeah.
Because you don't really like have enough space to put all your paintings like up on the walls or around. So
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, and also it's kind of something I get a bit jealous of painters for, because it's so physical.
yes,
Because
yeah.
like photography, like 99% of our stuff ends up on hard
The
drives,
laptop,
and
yeah.
like some of it we try and push into the physical space, like we do prints and exhibitions, books, etc. But like paintings, you always have like the real original.
Yes.
As like, unless you're doing film photography, you don't really have an original.
Yeah, I think like you're kind of limited on both parts, and also you have the freedom on both parts, because with photography you have the freedom of expressing yourself more or going creative more, because you don't have to think about, oh, I don't have like this color, or I don't have a canvas, or I don't have this and that. So you can just pick your camera, pick your phone, pick anything you want, and just like go crazy with Photoshop, with effects, with the lights, with everything. But when it comes to painting, you don't really have the space. But you do have that sort of freedom when you start to paint and you go crazy with everything, and you're like just being in that moment, in that feeling.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've often had like the sort of opposite thing, because like with painting, I could sit down and draw like a robot knocking down a building.
Yeah.
I can't photograph that.
Yeah,
for the same
true,
reasons
true.
you can't. You're saying like you're limited by money with painting. Like,
yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You do have the freedom to express yourself in both parts, but at the same time, you're limited by other things on both parts. So
Yeah.
it's really interesting. But when you're working with both, and you manage somehow to combine them, that's amazing, because you have like unlimited
So have you combined them?
resources. Well, you can just, for example, go very basic, draw something or paint something, and then take pictures of that thing, and you can Photoshop it, or you can make a collage. You can do anything you want, or you can take photos and then print them out and make a collage, or paint that thing, or play with the light, play with different effects, and then paint them, draw them. So
Like almost like you would as like a reference.
yeah, something like that. Or you can make the collage and create like a third type of option. So you don't have like the painting, the photo, and that's it. You can like have the collage as well. It's very interesting. You do have the freedom with everything.
Yeah, and I guess that's what you get from not limiting yourself to the definition of a photographer or a painter or something.
That's why I like to like call myself an artist, because it's so like it includes almost everything.
See, I kind of always, there's something about the term artist that although it fits, I've always tried to like steer clear of, because it just has that slight connotation of, I don't know, the pretentious French guy sort of.
It's always the French guy.
It's always going to be a French guy.
It's always the French guy.
But you know what I mean? Like, how have you, like, although it's not true, like, we know hundreds of artists and a lot of them aren't pretentious. I've just always steered towards, even when I'm doing more fine art projects and stuff, still seem towards, like, I'm a photographer, which I think I am. I tend to lean more to
the public to decide, or
no, I just lean more towards photography and leaning into, like, I have a big issue with certain projects, like trying to delineate like what's photography and what's not. Like, because there are some projects like, and you probably have experienced this because you do both, where you're like, oh, I really want to express this, but like photography doesn't do it and it needs to be a painting. Or photography can't do this, it needs to be a short film.
not really. I can't say I experienced this thing like photography doesn't do it, so I have to paint it, or painting doesn't do it, so I have to take a picture of it. I didn't really like experience that. That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't really have the knowledge on what photography does and doesn't. So I just like, I'm just doing whatever I feel like I want to do in that moment, regardless of it's photography or painting. I'm just like doing it. I wasn't really like restricted by this idea of painting doesn't do it or photography doesn't do it. I just went with all of them. And I experimenting.
Is it more just gut feeling?
Yes, kind of, yeah. It's more of a gut feeling, because usually when I create, I'm just going for whatever I feel in that moment, or whatever like influenced me in that day, or whoever influenced me. So I'm just going with that. I'm not really like, because I know some artists tend to make a plan of what they want to paint or what photo shoots they want to have and with who and however, but I don't really have a plan. I'm just going with my gut feeling in that moment, and I think inspiration for me just comes naturally.
Okay.
Usually,
but you've talked about influences, so that would be, because inspiration's a weird thing, and a lot of people, it's like a big struggle, because people go, I'm not feeling inspired today, I'm not like, blah blah blah, which like it's interesting, because like for the longest time, like it definitely has an influence, but as a like professional, you don't have the freedom to be like, I'm not inspired today. Like, you just have to get up and do it. So you have to like constantly be inspired by different things. But
especially when you're working for someone, because I know like some clients can ask you for some things like a painting or photo shoot, but they don't really like give you details, because usually they don't really know what they want to do. They have like a main idea, very general, but they don't really ask you like do this and that in details. So you kind of have to be inspired in that moment. You know how to tell them how to pose, or what light to use, or what effects, if you're editing in Photoshop, for example, to make something more maybe artistic.
Well, it's finding the reasons why you make all these small micro decisions in the process, and I think that's what makes like the difference between you just experimenting and like professionally approaching something, is because like every decision has like this, it goes from like oh, if I set up the lights here, here, and here, it will look cool. Versus they should go here, here, and here because it will look cool. But there's also smaller decisions within that based on like which side am I lighting more, which colors are we using, and what they feed into about the say story or mood or other things, and knowing how those work. And I'd say working with people as well, like you say, sometimes you get people who come in with like a real succinct idea of what they want, and that's where you have to know how to like achieve it, because in their head there's only one outcome that can be considered a success,
and that's their idea.
Yeah,
but they don't really like have a picture of that idea. Yeah,
and sometimes that means doing stuff that you wouldn't normally do if it was like up to you. And so sometimes you have to make a decision of whether it's just like, okay, it's not normally my style, but this still makes sense, versus like I wouldn't do it because they don't realize it's going to turn out shit. But I find like when working with people versus just making stuff for yourself, you have to sort of close the gap.
You have to compromise.
I don't know about, I guess it depends how you see it. It's compromise if you're like die hard, like I only do exactly what I want to do and will not tolerate doing a project that's different from my personal vision, which like some people work like that. Like some people have like, here's what I'm offering in terms of the art. I can tweak it so much. As some people are willing to like, let's just do whatever project, you know what I mean? But I tend to find like with every client you have there's like a spectrum of like, they come in with whether it's a vague idea or a very specific idea, and then you have to say what you can or can't do.
You have to communicate, that's the thing.
Yeah, and you have to make sure that like before it's finished and you hand in, that everyone's on the same page about what they're getting.
Definitely.
So, yeah, and just sort of, it's a weird thing to navigate.
Especially when you're like a creative and you have like so many ideas and your imagination just go crazy. And they're like, no, I don't really want that or that or that. So they kind of like limit you in a way. They're like, don't do that. I only like this idea.
Like, I think it's limiting if the only thing you're going to do is work for other people. Because if you really want to, most people also like, some of your best ideas you'll explain to someone and they'll be like, that's so fucking stupid. But if you do if you do it as part of like your personal work, and then you go, here's something I did before, and they can see it, and then they go, oh, actually it looks really cool. Like people, like Steve Jobs said it, people don't know what they want until you literally like shove it in their face.
Exactly. Like, because usually people, when they go for creatives and they ask for a photo shoot, for example, they don't really know how to picture their ideas. I'm not saying that they're not creative,
and it's not their job,
but it's not their job, and they don't really know how to picture their ideas. So it's your job to like kind of
interpret
them
it and
yes, exactly.
Yeah, execute it as well.
And also you're like kind of risking everything with that, because you're spending money and time on that idea, and they may not like it. So they can be like, actually, no, can we do it again? Because that's not what I had in mind. It's like, well, you didn't really say what you had in mind. You just explained something. That's
why
briefly.
I've been working to this like concept of like closing the gap. So like sometimes you can, like you say, you can choose those moments where it's okay to spend the extra time to give like, so what we normally do, like we did single art recently, and there was like, it was sent off with a few different variants of like the graphic design of the words on top, and at that moment it was just like accepting that 2 were going to be rejected and 1 would have been picked, which is what happened. But the risk is if you only submit 1, and if I'd done, or if I went 3 ways around every choice, then it would turn into like you've spent a year on this one thing, and people are just like, you know what I mean?
God, can we do it again?
Yeah. So that's why you've got to work to this. It's just getting everyone on the same page, I think, is the easiest way to put it.
It's an interesting process, isn't it? Like working with other people, especially with non-creatives, I should say. Because with creatives, I feel like it's easier for them to pick on your ideas or your vision, because they're going through almost the same
Well,
things.
Creatives know like the sort of the magic of the like the experiment and the just trusting that like and creatives are better at appreciating art as well. So they're more willing to be like, okay, we've come together, we've produced something that like we didn't know the end result until we've got it, but now like we look at what we've got and we're like, oh, that's cool.
It's working.
Nice. it's you take it for what it is. Is that non-creative people are going, I want this.
It's like a business for them.
Yeah,
it's
which it is, because they're hiring you to execute a job. It's fair enough, because they need an exact thing to fit in with everything else they've been doing. If we're,
that's why it's like interesting to compromise your vision and your creativity when it comes to this sort of businesses.
But I don't think it's compromise. If you market yourself correctly, you're gonna work with people who allow you to do what you want to do, and sometimes you are gonna have to compromise and do. Pardon?
It just depends on what they want, I think.
Yeah, and I think you recognize sort of people who won't be a good experience to work on stuff, and you won't get sort of really amazing portfolio pieces at the end, or work that you're interested in. Yeah.
You learn from that every single time, and you're growing from that. You're like maybe discovering a part of yourself that you didn't know exists. So it's nice. Very nice.
Except when it goes wrong.
Well, it always goes wrong at some point in the process. It's always like that. Because you're creating, but like, do you have that moment when you're having a photo shoot and you do have the idea, you know what you want to do, but at the same time it turns out to be like a bunch of bullshit or something like that. You're like,
a bunch of bullshit.
No, a bunch of in my mind, when I'm creating, when I'm painting, for example, I'm like, oh my God, I spent so much time on this thing and it's like, it's shit. It doesn't work. It's like, but you're learning from that, even though it's not great. You wouldn't post it on Instagram or TikTok, or you wouldn't like take it to an exhibition. It's still like you're learning. But
you learn from it, and that's constantly what you do. It's just like adding new different things, and even on. I had a shoot in. It doesn't matter when, because by the time this podcast's out, I had a shoot some point in the past where basically. The night before, I had an idea for the shot I wanted, and I was like, I think it'll work this way. We got there, we set it up quick, we tried it, just wasn't working. The light setup quite the way we thought it would. And instead of just like trying to be like, okay, let's just do it and have half-assed shit, we just scrapped it and rolled back onto like a different idea. But it's always about having like 3 or 4 different tricks up your sleeve, especially in shoots where it's kind of just like, we're hiring you to do what you want. You have to bring something to the table. As if it was a shoot where they're like, we want this. Yeah. You just nail that before they even come in, and then you just basically add them in as a face, and it's like easy. But I think like with the other ideas, it just you've got to make it seem like you're coming up with it on the spot, but
you gotta make it seem like you're a professional and you know what you're doing, even though sometimes you're like as lost as them. Like, guys, no, I'm a professional. I know what I'm doing here. Yeah. Everybody move.
And like, I think it's a weird thing, because sometimes you're not always going to have ideas. And I think that's why it's important to take down notes, because you never know when you're going to have a week where you have to do like 4 photo shoots in a week and have to have fresh ideas for each one and not repeat yourself.
Do you feel like...
Without like running out.
Honestly, when you're like writing down ideas... You do feel some kind of inspiration in that moment. That's why you're like writing them down, because you feel inspired.
Yeah.
But maybe you're like trying on those ideas maybe later, or maybe after a week or a month or something like that. Do you feel as inspired as you were when you wrote them down, or?
Yeah, because you can definitely get like over some ideas, and like especially some projects, it's difficult to get into the headspace correctly and easy to fall out of the headspace of that project, which I had on my my uni project, the Angels and Ghosts scene.
Yes, yeah. That was one of my favorites, actually.
There's a lot of people's favorites, but like
I think it's because of the colors. It's so
it's but like
abstract.
The actual point of it and stuff at the time, because it was like stuff that was happening now. It's easier to like sit back now and kind of figure out what I was doing and stuff, but at the time it was like I sometimes before I started working on like the sketchbook for it and stuff you have to do for uni, it'll be like half an hour of just
you have to like do some type of research.
Well, it's just explaining it.
Yeah.
It was we had to write an essay to go along with it and explain why you'd done it and like the research and things.
How do you feel about like explaining your art, your process and everything? Because I know
We're starting a
always talking about it, but
hot button issue, especially between us two, because you constantly tell me there's no meaning to your art and
oh my
you're
God,
just making
yes, and
it
you're
up
like
as you
so
go along.
annoyed with me. You're
Yeah,
like,
I
Ada,
am.
you do have a meaning. Please just say it out
because
loud.
there is a fucking meaning.
I mean, there is a meaning, but at the same time, it's like I don't like explaining like everything by word, like word by word to the people.
Well, yeah, but you don't have to. As
Yeah,
an
but some
Angel,
people,
like
like, for
with my
example, in
projects, I
uni.
don't explain it to everyone. Like it's there if
Just like
people
a few
ask,
lucky
or
people.
yeah, but it's yeah. If people are interested and want to know more, then I do talk about it. But I don't necessarily tell everyone. But I have to know for my own sanity. Otherwise, it's like, why the fuck did I make that project?
Oh yeah.
Why is and so
You're
and some
asking
projects
yourself, like, why is that?
it's simpler than others. Like I think when you say it, when you're like, there's no meaning.
When
what
I
you're
say-
you're rebelling against your lecturers that ask you what does it mean, and then being like, I don't want to sit and plan before.
I had
Because
so many issues in uni, like explaining
Yeah.
things.
but it's a really good exercise to do, and it will feel because you're working so almost subconsciously, because you're going off of gut feeling. You've got to sort of train your gut.
Yeah, exactly.
And you'll
you have to,
become-
like, train your mind to be in sync with your
Yeah.
gut as well.
Because when you work off of gut feeling, your body's in sort of flight and I can't talk apparently, fight or flight,
Take your time.
which is like why, martial artists train for hours for, but
That's the most random.
no, but
example.
it makes sense because like when you actually get into that situation, your body reverts onto like the lowest level.
Yeah.
So if you've practiced a punch or something and you're like, I did it once, really, really good. If you end up in a situation where you have to use that, the one that's going to come out in the actual situation, because you're not planning to do it, you're just falling back on instinct, is
Yeah.
going to be the worst version of that punch. So working unconsciously, you have to, after you've done it, you have to look into like, so why did my mind go there? Like, especially with, like for photography, you're drawn to certain things and they're different things at different times. Like I had to figure out why I found these webcam photos interesting.
Oh yeah.
So
It's
like,
really more about like having a monologue or like a honest conversation with yourself, rather
Yeah.
than just like writing something down like an explanation for the public. I think
Yeah, I
those
think
are like
so.
quite different. Those
oh
two.
yeah. What I present to the public is always slightly different than the full
And
ins and outs
shorter.
because big
Feeling
time.
that.
And as well, like sometimes a project doesn't fit neatly into a written word thing. It needs to have the discussion,
Yeah.
and that's where you get to choose what you place into the images themselves, what you place into, say, a foreword of the book or an exhibition statement, and then what you place into when people ask you more about the work. You need to give them enough to make them intrigued to ask more and want to know more and stuff.
But when I'm thinking about like, because I had this conversation with one of my teachers in uni, they kept asking me like, why is that? Why do you make the things that you make? And they wanted me to explain like everything word by word. And I was like, I don't want to explain everything because I think it's important to leave some space for the public to create their own opinion on it, their own story. In my opinion, I think it's beautiful when you leave some space for the public to interact with your
and
art.
insert themselves into the interaction.
Yes, exactly.
But I still
because-
feel like when you do it for a lecturer or teacher, that's not for the public. That's to prove to the teacher that you know what you're doing.
oh my God, I remember one
but that
time.
stuff's still for you because surely you're painting stuff. If you're just going off a gut reaction, aren't you like, why did I paint that? Are you not curious? Because I have pictures that I'm like,
Well-
why did I feel so fucking compelled to take that? And it is like magical when you figure it out because you're like, oh, and it's
Well, to be
because there's
honest,
always a reason. And
I know what I'm doing and the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. I pretty much know whether it's about photography or painting. I know the reasons, but I just don't want to like say everything to the public. I just want to like keep it like some sort of like maybe mysterious, if I can say that. Because I don't
Yeah.
want to explain like everything like, yeah, I went through this phase in my life, or I had this feeling in that moment and I created this thing, like
Yeah.
word by word. I just
Yeah,
want to like
but
let
you
the
but
people
you could say the work's inspired by feeling on the day and
Yeah,
things like
definitely,
that.
like,
That part
yeah.
is what you give away to the public, so they know there is something behind
You
it.
can give them like a brief idea or something, like a general idea about your art, but not like word by word, like explaining everything. Because with my teachers, they wanted me to explain everything, like every
Yeah.
single bit of my painting. And I was like, well, I don't really want to do that, because where is your part in that? Where is your interaction with my art if you just
But
read
I think
the text?
they're
That's it.
asking for a different thing than what you're talking about, which is like the public when you show it to people who
when they
see you.
because
they need to do it for marketing.
explain, they were like, you have to explain for the exhibitions, because we like constantly had exhibitions in uni.
Okay.
So
But I still feel like it's because it's a course and you need to because the examiner can't just be like, oh, she's left it vague. You can't mark off of that, because someone could hand in a blank sketchbook and say, I've left it deliberately
actually. It
vague.
really depends, because one of my teachers, he was like, well, I really love that it's mysterious and it's not like explained fully. Meanwhile, my other teacher, after I explained everything word by word, he was like, oh, your art is like a burger.
A burger?
A burger. I was like, what do you mean? He was like, well, you have layers in that, because you remember I used to like paint on cardboard,
Yeah.
and I was doing collage on them and sorts of things. And he was like, well, it's so layered, like you paint and after that you paint like a different layer and a different layer, and you like put some paper on it or anything like that. And he just described my art as a burger. So I identified as a burger maker for like a year or something like that. So
I mean, that's
Maybe it was
interesting,
funny.
but that's like two creative minds coming together. I think the point he was probably maybe,
I think he was hungry.
yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I'd imagine so. If he's seeing
He was definitely
paint
hungry.
as a burger,
If you see
he
this
was
right now,
starving.
sorry, not sorry.
Poor guy. But
Yeah.
I think that thing, when
Traumatizing.
you leave it, you like, my thing is, it's like how you guide people through your work to reach, because ultimately you want them to interact with the work,
Yeah.
but to figure out your intention on their own. I don't want, like with my work personally, it's interesting when people feed back, because I can say, okay, so that's what I got across. And I
Yeah.
might end up with someone looking at, say, one of my projects and thinking it's about zoology or something. Like, you know, but something really random that's not actually at all to do with it. And that to me is where I'm like, okay, so what do I need to change to have my sort of visual language more accurate to what I want to express? And it's all of my books kind of play on those different things. It's like, how much do I need to give someone to push them this way so they come back to me and go, I think it stems from my frustration with, like, when I started photography, you'd show it to your friends and they'd all go, it's really good, or it's really bad.
They're
And I'm
always
like,
like that, like, oh yeah, it's really good. And you can see like on their face they're trying to be nice, but they don't
Yeah.
understand a thing.
you can't take anyone giving you art criticism that's either negative or positive. You almost
There's
can't,
no in between.
like, you can't listen to, because it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Like, to be fair, actually, it's more truthful if they tell you it's shit. But there's a lot of bullshit when
Because
people,
you know they're honest, but when
Yeah.
they're like, oh yeah,
Or
it's
they're just
very
being
beautiful,
mean,
they're like
to be
giving you
fair.
that smile, and they're
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, okay, cool.
oh, it's really good, it's cool,
You're like,
I like
oh
it.
God, they don't
It's
understand the words.
interesting. As like,
Oh, when they say it's interesting, you know, that's the moment when you know.
yeah, what I do is when I show people work is have in my head like certain words that I'd want from people feedbacking,
Yeah.
giving feedback.
Giving feedback.
Or like when
Well, new
people,
word, everyone.
like when you
Feedbacking.
show the work is what you'd want people to think about or say, and now it's gone, like, I've with each book sort of pushed it more and more precise of a reaction I want from it.
Do you work like thinking of people's opinion? Do you work thinking what they might say or think about your art, or you just like make it and then you worry about the explanation part?
I think I'm pretty similar to you in that I'm working unconsciously, and there's a big scary bit in between, especially with Angels and Ghosts and my upcoming book. That
Put it here, like on the table.
oh, we should have laid them all out. I moved them over there for an Insta post thing, but I've just
well.
got swept up
Check
in the
the
day.
Insta, everyone.
But the upcoming book, it kind of especially Angel Ghost, you shot it, and I'm like, I have these really cool looking images, but like to me, if like I can't justify why it exists and what its purpose is as a photograph, then it's, to me, it's bullshit and I failed.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't, I couldn't, because you know Ty.
Yeah.
He's pushed me several times to be like, you should do a follow-up to that book. And
he's pushing everybody at this point. He's like,
oh no, he's
do
great.
This, do that, do that.
Yeah. He's super positive reinforcement, but he also really liked that book, and he was like, you should do more of that style stuff. That style stuff's really cool. And I'm like, it's not doable. Like you can't do it because it was so connected to the issue of COVID. It's actually a photojournalism project. It's documentary photography.
So it was like in regards to the COVID period.
Because everyone went on webcam. Their webcam photos of an art event I was asked to document, which got moved online like 2 weeks before, and I was like, oh, I've lost the commission. And then they were like, no, we still want you to photograph it. So I had my laptop in my bedroom like photographing it, which was just bizarre. But then it was just like, it
was a very bizarre time. But I think it's like, it's way harder to document that type of isolation now, because it's like you're not really experimenting and experiencing that thing anymore.
But now, and also like Zoom calls and team calls they're used, but they're not like prevalent like they used to be. It wasn't our like main form of communication. Like now we go meet up in person. And the book was like, had all these sort of different levels and layers of meaning and stuff I explored, that like doing it now would just be like forced. I'd have to like organize a webcam call with someone. And it just doesn't make sense. There's nothing I can relate back to it in the real world. Like all of my projects somewhat like me and Alex, to be fair, have like a strong tie to like documentary and photojournalism and stuff.
I noticed.
Yeah. So like in our head it has to function.
Yeah, and it has to happen in order to document
which is also what I was trying to get to with like the difference between like painting and photography. Because if you look at, not that anyone's seen this, but early stuff in that project, it was really fucking weird. I think I was going crazy.
Wait,
but
what project?
The Angels and Ghosts project.
That one. Okay.
The early stuff is completely different.
It is. It's very different. Like that project specifically is very different. I was so drawn to it because of the colors, like first of all, and I was like, what's going on there? Like you can really like see what's going on, but it's so chaotic and it's so interesting. It's like you're discovering a new type of world. And I was like, what's going on in your mind? I was so curious. I was like, because obviously in your photography, like on a daily basis, you're like documenting what's happening in that day, like whether it's a gig or a family function or like spending time with your friends, which is like pretty like obvious from the photo. But in those specific photos, it was so different and so maybe abstract.
But it was still doing the same thing.
Yeah,
it was documenting,
you're still
that event.
But in such a different and unique way. It was
and abstract and feeling like a different world is two of my, I was talking about like words I want people to use, because what it was the idea that our communication with each other had been abstracted. The same way as it always is. This podcast is a weird abstract way of communicating with the rest of the world. A telephone call abstracts you down to just a voice. The webcam was the next step of that. And I know what I noticed was people, because you weren't physically with someone, on webcam, suddenly everyone gestured everything because they were worried, like, has the sound dropped out? Am I, like, how many times on a Zoom call you've been like, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
And you have,
and you're like, hello,
yeah, hello. Like, people over-exaggerate the gestures. That's what that's why it hones in on hands, because that was, like, the purest form of what these Zoom calls became about in how it affected our communication and became its own little weird state.
And it also shows like the desire of communicating between people. They feel the need to communicate, whether it's through a camera, visually, or checking if the sound work or something like that. They're like communicating with you, with their hands, with everything. Like,
and I think the Zoom calls were like a sign of like, because in lockdown where we couldn't see each other, like go physically hang out, we could have just telephoned each other still.
Yeah, it was
could
like
have
back
used
in the
Snapchat,
days.
but the whole world had to step and go, no video calls, so we can see the person,
So
see
we
their
can see
facial
your
expressions and hear their voice.
Yeah.
Like the phone call abstracting us down to just a voice.
It was a human
wasn't
need of
enough
like,
to fulfill our need of like communication.
Exactly.
But that was the function of that's why I can't do a second one unless another pandemic happens
It was
or
very intimate
another
in
reason.
a way. It was like very personal. Even though it was like through cameras, and it was on the video call, you can see on everybody like wanting that comfort, wanting that, I don't know, sort of connection with the others. Because it was like it was through the cameras, it was online, it wasn't like face to face or very physical. It was like you can see their desire of communicating and getting in touch with their friends, their loved ones. So it was very intimate, it was very personal.
Yeah, and I think relatable to people because that's what they were going through. But I feel like if I dropped it now and just like had hired people to pose their hands and stuff, it would have had that sort of like, okay,
no, because you're not,
you did it for, you had to do a project.
Anymore,
you know what I mean? So that's...
It's like, what's the point? It's like, you're just making a second version. Cheaper maybe. It's not Adidas, it's Abibas.
As that's what like the early stuff in that project felt like. They were like, and they tried to fit in with like my normal black and white, harsh sort of film style. They're weird, but like trying to explain to my lecturers the same concept, although it hadn't really like, COVID hadn't fully happened yet, but it was like coming, you know what I mean? Like stuff was starting to shift.
The way you say like coming, like terrified.
Like people knew of COVID, places were locking down. We were like just about to be next, but the lecturers didn't gel with that, and the way it had been communicated didn't make sense. And those pictures, I think I would have got away with it if I'd painted those. I can't paint, so I couldn't do that. That's why I had to change the visual output to match the... You always get on me.
That's the question.
No, I didn't. But also I was doing a photography course. If I turned around and handed in paintings, that's F immediately, no matter how good.
Well, you don't know, because I had like one of my girls in university, she was like, oh, I'm an artist, I'm such a good artist, but she didn't know who Picasso is. So anything is possible. I was shocked. I thought she was joking, but she was that serious. So you never know.
Well, Picasso's old. He didn't. Like, he's not relevant anymore.
That guy anymore. Like, we don't care about him.
It's all about the new guys. It's about.
I know. It's all about who? The new guys. Who are the new guys? It's all about like the future guys.
Let's concentrate on the future. Don't dwell on the past. But which, talking about your influences that you wanted to talk about, because you said you're mainly inspired by everyone's inspired by the past, but you're looking maybe back a bit further than...
Like, I'm really going for it, man. I know like every single documentary. Andy Warhol, Basquiat, oh my God, ask me anything. Yeah.
So what we're looking at, like sort of the late 20th century.
Yeah, like maybe in the 80s, 70s, 80s, something around that time.
And what draws you to that? Because it seems to be a range of different types of artists from that time period, but what links them is mainly the time period.
Yeah. Well, for example, with Warhol and Basquiat, because I was so influenced by them, I think what attracted me the most was their freedom. Because with Warhol, he didn't really care what people think. He was making fun more than anything about the people and his art. Obviously, he was serious about his art, but he was more looking to build a career and be famous rather than just making art. So I think maybe in that sense, maybe his attitude on view, on life, and how he created this sort of persona attracted me more. But with Basquiat, he talked about racism, he talked about struggles, he talked about his life as a young creative, like struggling with money and with life and with drugs as well. So I think that attracted me, and I sort of found myself in that art, because obviously when you're young, you're struggling, like financially, you're struggling.
Yeah.
Socially, because you're like, well, am I good enough? Am I not good enough? How do you make friends, or how do you interact with sort of people? Because you can't really have the same speech with everybody. So it's like, I think those sorts of like details really influenced me, and I found myself in his art and his experience. Obviously, I can like relate to racism, but it's like a sort of like, I don't know. I think it was very different for me because I just moved from Romania. I was like, I experienced different cultures. And I was like, in Romania, I experienced a sort of culture with a sort of like education and people. And when I got here, I was like, what's going on here? It's so different, because it wasn't that strict. It wasn't that like, even with education, they weren't that strict. They were like, if you like it, just do whatever you want. Just express yourself.
I'd say as well, like, it's interesting because what you're comparing is education at like the high school here, secondary school level,
it's like
to
education
doing
and culture at the same time.
Yeah.
It's like both of them played a very important role in my development in my life.
But I will say it's kind of the same here. Like, secondary school is a lot more limiting with art subject, or not limiting, but they're trying to get you to understand technique and sort of the real basic groundwork, which a lot of people find. I mean, you only have to go on YouTube to find, like, I hate my art teacher because he wouldn't let me draw anime girls and made me draw realistically. But at the university level, they want you to be that bit more experimental and kind of go off and find what you're going to do afterwards, essentially. And also, the key of university is, like, across any course, is like critical thinking, which is kind of what we've talked about too much on this podcast. But it's good. It's good.
It's good. It's important. But yeah, even like with the culture in Romania, for example, if you're an artist, you really don't have like a future there. It's like they're more strict in that sense.
I don't think you have a future in here either. You don't have a future. The world hates.
It's more of a the world is on fire right now, so you don't really have a future anymore. But in Romania, you have to like become a doctor or a lawyer, like most of the time, in order to be taken seriously. But when it comes to England, you're like, oh, I'm an artist. Everybody's like, oh, it's so cool. Like, they start asking you questions about your ideas and about your goals, your career. But in Romania, they're like, you're an artist. That's it, end of the conversation, because they're not interested. They don't really see a point in having that conversation with you. So
I think here has, like, I mean, go back 30, 40 years, it's probably the same here. I think it's just like, with here is a lot more wrapped up with like celebrity culture, and we've kind of passed that down from America, so we're much more accepting of, like, because we've seen other people as an artist make shit tons of money. Oh yeah, that's when people accept you as an artist.
Stuck on the wall. That traumatized me. That really got me.
But it's that thing of like, people won't take what you're doing seriously until you're like in here. I don't, like, my family have supported me, but I think if I was in here still being like, no one's using the studio, we just hang around making a podcast, being creative, they're like, well, it's not effective. That's why like the function's always been very important, because it's like, you have to, it's weird, you kind of have to be able to generate the money, and it is important because like you say, paint costs money, film costs money, the cameras cost money. If you want to do it, you have, and life costs money. So it's like, you have to do it, but it's like, it's how you do it and how you sort of. But there is a lot of people that, like, there are some really amazing artists who aren't making any money off their art, that are just kind of looked over, because it's like, until you're successful, we won't give a shit.
Oh yeah, but and most of them, like, they become successful after they die.
Yeah, they become successful after they die because of how unsuccessful they are. That's a big selling point, that, oh, everyone overlooked them and how awful it was. And it's like, well, you're the people who overlooked them. And now the people who have swooped in to make money off the back of them, now they're dead and they can't take any kudos for it.
No, we don't have anything like that anymore. Bring it back. We can't really. But no, even like with the perspectives that people have on certain type of art, like talking about my art and my photography, for example. If I would do that in Romania, they would see me like basically seeing like straight for like as a slut or something like that, like
Right.
getting not naked but fully naked, or like exposing yourself on social media just like that,
Yeah.
they would see like, oh my god, you're selling yourself, are you doing porn, are you doing something, which is not true at all, but they would see like in such an extreme way. When it comes to like doing this type of photography and art here, people are like, oh, this is so cool. Like, of course there are like exceptions, but people usually are like, oh, this is so cool. Like, do you want to like do a collaboration, or like want to work together, want to do a photo shoot for me? Like, I want to do that as well. So it's very like, it's inspiring as well, because there were some people telling me that, some girls telling me that, oh my god, you're such a, not symbol, but like maybe an example of pushing them to be more comfortable with themselves. And like, if she can do that, I can do that as well. And this makes me so happy, because obviously I'm doing this for myself, first of all, but it gives me such a big happiness and joy when it comes to inspiring other people or other women.
Yeah.
So I can do that here, because the culture is more relaxed, is more like acceptable.
Yeah, it's a
But
bit
I
more
can really
open to things that aren't sort of the norm, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And especially like here, where I think people, are just more accepting, more open to things that
Yeah.
are different, because, well, it's been a country that, you know what, go back 40, 50 years probably wasn't that open and accepting. So I
Yeah,
think the young
exactly.
people now are a bit more just like, more willing to be outrageous, just because out
Go for it, do
of
whatever you want.
sort of frustration more than anything, like people our age just wanting to do
They just want to
what they
express
want.
themselves. They just want to like be free, especially when
Yeah.
you're young and a creative, or you want to get into the creative field. You just want to express yourself. You just want to like be free and create whatever you want
Yeah.
and express however you want. Meanwhile, in Romania, if you're doing like this sort of photography or art, they'll be like, they will look at you weirdly. They would judge you. They wouldn't like try to judge you like in your face, like straightforward, but they would absolutely judge you, and
Yeah.
they wouldn't view like in a good way anyway. So that's why maybe I found some type of freedom when it comes to art when I changed cultures.
That's
So,
interesting, because you came here for uni.
yeah, I came here
What
in
was your
2019.
Yeah.
Something
So you
like
came straight to Northampton. What was
Every
the
single day
impression?
when I wake up, I'm like, why? Why did I do that? Well, I just moved here because I got accepted in like 3 universities, and one of them was London. But because I realized, oh my God, I'm going to move here by myself. It's going to be like quite a struggle to pay everything, and just like,
because
know
London's
everything.
expensive. I mean, here's
Yes.
not actually that much cheaper, but
it's not much cheaper, but it's cheaper than London anyway. So back in those times, like it was like 100 years ago, I was like, it's way cheaper in Northampton, and Northampton is quite close to London. So in my mind, I was like, let me go to Northampton for university, and then I can move to London.
right.
So
And now you're still
and
here,
now I'm
4
still
years
here,
later.
working to move in Manchester. Do you know what? I'm stuck here because I love you guys too much. So
So it's our. Don't blame us.
well, I just blamed you. I just blamed you. Do whatever you want with that. I was not. You know, I love you. But no, I just like. Honestly, it was such a cool experience for me because you messaged me and you're like, "Oh, we're creating this studio." You didn't say like want to work with us, but you're like, "Do you want to be part of the studio in like some sort of way?"
Yeah, because
Just like hanging around. I guess
I think that
my
was
part.
yeah. Well, no, but that's good. That's what it's kind of heartwarming to hear, because it's like the reason we started this was to kind of create a sort of hub for all the different creatives in Northampton. The other way, like just this box of a fucking room
It
becomes,
really is a box. Oh my God! You need to like get a bigger studio, please. I
but
wanna
it
put my paintings
becomes
on the wall.
a connecting thread for all these people who otherwise probably wouldn't have like met each other or know about each other.
Yeah.
And that was what we thought was lacking, because we'd like when we got first introduced to people doing stuff in Northampton, it's like, oh, there actually is cool stuff here, and everyone else on YouTube is like, there's nothing here, and it's like, well, if you went outside, you'd fucking realize.
Yeah.
But people
That
didn't
happened to
have.
me as well. I didn't know there's like a bunch of creatives walking
Yeah.
around the town because I didn't know anyone when I moved here. I remember like being in uni and like I struggled so much with making friends in university because they quite, I don't know, I think they judged me based on my accent. It was in that point, because we didn't have like any other interaction besides like talking to each other. But after that, I was like, is anything like going on around this town? Because I just viewed it as boring. Yeah. Which, of course, you can't really blame people when they're like walking outside for a bit or like a week and they're like, oh, it's so boring. Yeah. But and because I got in the studio, I got to know you guys, and through this studio, I got to know so many creatives. That's how I actually realized how creative this entire town is.
And it's not because of the studio that everyone's creative. Everyone was already creative. It's just we wanted to like...
It created some sort of community.
Yeah, and a bit of a community and a network around all these people that are doing really cool stuff and bringing them together.
And also you gave them like a chance to express themselves more. Because besides this studio, I think I know like maybe one studio in town, like with photography and art.
Is that us?
Yeah, PHOTOMAFIA Part 2. It's like, you don't really have like a studio where you can create and hang around with other people, which is very important for creatives to have conversations. And
I think that was our other thing, that like the creative scene would come together and it would be either like, it would basically be at the pub. Yeah. And everyone's too drunk to actually get something. The Garibaldi. And it's like a great place to meet people. And obviously pubs are great and serve that purpose as well. But they're like, I think this slightly changed the importance of like, sometimes you'd meet people and they come up with ideas, but they were mainly just throwing stuff out. And they're like, the main purpose of tonight is we're on a night out. As here, it's like the purpose of being here is to meet creatives and be creative and get stuff off the ground. And
have long conversations about the culture or art, different ideas, like anything possibly. You can like joke around. Meanwhile, in Garibaldi, I feel like there's so many drunk people around. And obviously you can like make jokes and talk about stuff, but you don't really like have that space and time.
It's not geared up to it. It's like how what's LinkedIn's new logo that's like meet your audience when they're in the mood to do business. That's the difference. So like if they come here, they're in that sort of creative person mode, being like, what's other people doing? What do I want to be doing? They're not in let's go for a night out. How drunk am I going to get tonight? Are we gonna like all the
are we gonna
the
like
pub
play
stuff?
Spin the bottle or something?
Yeah.
But dramatic.
But
no, it's different. It's definitely different. And I'm so grateful for that, because I always like talk to people about the studio. I'm not saying like, oh, I work with them, because I don't really like work with you besides.
But you're part of the community here of people who come in and through the door.
I'm one of the pioneers, because I saw you like building the studio.
Well, you were part of the some of the cool people we knew before we started the studio.
Yeah, true.
Like, so you saw us just like have this weird idea that no one really knew what we were doing. But
no, it was definitely good, and I'm so grateful that you messaged me. You're like, oh, let's get it. Yeah, what's going on there?
I don't know. What's happening? Because you're looking. Oh, fuck's sake! Do you wanna go take stuff off of it and then?
Guys, we will take a little break now. If that camera is still running, we are taking a break. We will be back with you in like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. All good. Okay, here we are back from the break.
Yeah, back from the break.
Great.
God, I can't remember where we were at all, but I think
we were talking about culture, I think, and then I came up like want to talk about feminism, and you were
that
like,
was in the break.
No.
Well, I feel like that's a long ass conversation for a podcast that's already 50 minutes in. To be honest, we were at the point of like wrapping up, so I think maybe this just be.
Okay, so that's it, guys.
That's the end. Yeah, cut.
Really? That was it, guys. C'est fini.
Yeah, go for it.